So I've been talking more than half an hour, and I haven't really talked about the singularity yet. This is a course about technology and the future of medicine. I think it's actually maybe one of the talks in this course where the two come truly together, where we talk about technology and medicine in the same sentence by somebody who's interested in both medicine and technology, which would be me. And I like this definition of the singularity. I think this is from The Guardian, actually. At the moment when technological change becomes so rapid and profound, it represents a rupture in the fabric of human history. And of course, there are different sorts of singularities. This is the term that was used first. The first definition of singularity is that it's from physics. There's a black hole with an event horizon at the top, and then there's a gravity well, and at the bottom there's a singularity. And anything that passes the event horizon gets sucked into the black hole and passes through the singularity. And the point is that a singularity is a point between one state of existence and another. And it's a one-way portal. You go down the bottom of that gravity well, you go through the singularity, there's no coming back. Anything that passes that event horizon, light, particles, whatever, the idea is that you can't get it back again. And to some degree, you feel a bit silly talking about the singularity, because in some ways, there's no way that information can pass from one side of a singularity to another side of a singularity. So it's sort of a bit fruitless talking about what we think is on the other side of the singularity, because it's actually not really relevant to us. What's happening in that side of the singularity isn't relevant to us the same way that we're not really relevant to them. And here's Kurzweil's 2 books. I think he's got a new one coming out about how to build a brain or something, I think, in the next few weeks. He talks about the age of spiritual machines. And the one that, I've read a bit of that, but the one that I'm most familiar with is The Singularity is Near. I got it for Christmas one year, and I read it in like 3 days. And I think it really resonated with me in terms of what he's talking about in terms of genomics, what he's talking about in terms of nanotech, and what he's talking about in terms of robotics. And of course, he's projecting something like 2050, when something that's going to be singularity-like may well occur. And I think it's hard to know. I know I got a phone call recently from a sociologist that I know from the University of Calgary, and he was asking what I knew about the singularity, and we had this talk back and forth about how serious the singularity was. And I said, I have mixed emotions about it. In one way, it's an interesting theoretical proposition. What will happen as we accelerate? What will happen to information? What will happen to our technologies? What will happen to our bodies as we go forward? In another way, if you learn anything from human history, it's the same thing that Ygritte says to Jon Snow in Game of Thrones all the time. You know nothing, Jon Snow. The way that you imagine things will not be the way that it's going to turn out. Just because you think it's going to be this way doesn't really mean very much at all. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about in a minute, it probably won't turn out like this. But if you learn anything from human history, it's probably going to be more messy, more strange, more confusing, and more wonderful than what you would expect. And I think that's the nice thing about the singularity. It gives you the chance to think off the map a little bit, to go outside the box, think about some crazy things that may well be coming down the road. So what's the singularity going to do to our bodies? What is this rapid technological change that Kurzweil talks about? What is it likely to do to our bodies? And the paradigm that I've used before is these kind of 6 steps. First of all, understand how the body works. Second of all, perhaps if we understand it, we can control it in some way. We can modify the way the body works. Moving on from that, we can perhaps augment the way the functions of the body work. And maybe we can back up some or perhaps all of the functions of the body or of consciousness. At some point, Kurzweil talks about abandoning the body and then perhaps transcending the body as well. I mean, his title there is subtitle at the top. You can almost not see it. It's called When Humans Transcend Biology. Kurzweil talks about kind of getting rid of biology, more or less. So I'll run through them quickly just to give you an idea of what we're talking about for each one of them, and then I'll give you some examples. So option 1 is kind of understanding and controlling the body. I've kind of rolled those into 2. And this is a slide from Wired magazine 2 or 3 years ago. It says, tumor X 30 milligrams. Take 1 tablet by mouth 3 times daily for the treatment of lung cancer. Tumour should disappear by day 20. And that is the sort of thing I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about figuring out what sort of radiation treatment to give a patient with lung cancer or what sort of chemotherapy to give them. I'm talking about taking diseases that are big diseases today, that will kill you today, and understanding to the point where you take a tablet and they go away. My grandmother actually died from lung cancer. She died 3 months after diagnosis. And that's a very typical story for lung cancer. So to really get to the point where you can understand the body to this degree would be a big deal. And I've talked before about my father and the television. When the television wasn't working properly, he would run up to it and he would hit it on the side, as if hitting the cabinet would somehow fix the picture on the screen. And I think that's largely where we are with our understanding of the body right now. I mean, I take diseases that are occurring at a molecular, cellular level, and I tackle them with a big knife, a big sharp thing where I cut out big chunks of tissue. And if we could understand disease properly, we wouldn't have to do that anymore. And I would be, as I hope to be in the future, unemployed. Option 2 is augmenting. I'll talk quite a bit about augmentation in a minute, but to give you an example of augmentation, here's poor old Oscar Pistorius, the South African double amputee. And here he is on his blades on the legs that he was running on. And in fact, since I gave this talk the last time, there's been a development in the Pistorius story. I talked about it before. There was actually a whole debate about whether Pistorius should be allowed to run in the Olympics at all, whether he should be allowed to compete with other people who are able-bodied who haven't had amputations done. Because there was some concern that actually Pistorius had an unfair advantage, like his legs would make him faster, his new legs would make him faster and better than the guys who had old-fashioned legs. So 2 things happened. One thing is that Pistorius ran in the Olympics and he didn't do very well. In fact, he didn't win. So the people who said that these legs would give him a fantastic advantage, which I always thought was a bit unfair, because the guy's a double amputee, come on, how much of an advantage is that? He didn't do as well as he had hoped. He didn't conquer the world in terms of 200 meters. The other issue is that it turns out Pistorius is not the only double amputee in the world. He's not the only double amputee who runs on legs. And there's actually another one. And there's now a debate about the appropriateness of running on legs. In fact, not just whether you should run on legs, but what sort of legs. And Pistorius actually had to apologize because his colleague actually, on this other set of legs, won an event or did very well in an event. And Pistorius criticized him. And he said the legs were too long or too springy or was unfair in some way. So the debate has now moved on from whether it's okay to run on legs to which sort of legs it's okay to run on. So we're not talking about whether it's okay to augment. We're talking about how precisely we should do that. Option 3 is backing up. We're getting a little bit off the map now, but this is the cover of Time, which Kim has shown you a number of times, I'm sure. The idea that maybe there's some way that you can take some form of consciousness that you would be located in or identify with and take it out of your body in some way and hold it somewhere else, so that if something bad happens to your body, you can be backed up, you can come back to your body again. Option 4 is to abandon. So not just to take it out of the body and put it back into the body, but to take it out of the body and put it somewhere else. And it can be me or you or consciousness or identity or whatever we want to talk about. An article from The Independent, actually, in the UK, saying by 2040 you'll be able to upload your brain. And they talk about Kurzweil and mind-boggling technology. And it actually talks about a common theme, actually, with Kurzweil, which is living forever and immortality. And he talks a little bit about Kurzweil wanting to bring his father back. And Kurzweil's been criticized quite a bit for this, for saying that one of the reasons why he's interested in this whole field is because he wants to bring his father back from the dead. Option 5 then gets really kind of trippy, which is transcending. Which is actually going away from physical location and physical bodies completely. And the phrase that Kurzweil uses is saturating the local space-time continuum of the solar system with information. And he's quite vague about what that would look like. But the idea that somehow identity consciousness can reside outside a body somewhere and can exist somewhere in a continuum is kind of freaky. So, what will the singularity do to my body then? Let's look at some concrete examples of how these 5 things that I'm talking about may well occur in the real world. I mean, some of these things, one of the things I'd like you to walk away from this today is that Call it singularity, call it rapid technological development, call it whatever you want. Some of this stuff is happening today. Some of this stuff has happened already. And it's not going to go away. It's not going to get any slower. It's only likely to speed up as we go along. So I'm going to be talking about some real stuff that's actually happened and will be happening very soon, and kind of how we're going to cope with it. So let's talk about understanding and controlling first of all. So this is an article from CTV News last week that I picked up on my feed on Facebook about a consciousness scanner giving hope to brain trauma patients. So people who've had their brain injured. And in some way, this is an actual article from the last week or two. In some way, we're going to scan consciousness in using electrical activity in the brain and put it somewhere else, or understand what's happening in the brain and try and augment or try and fix injuries in people who have had brain trauma. Here's another one. This is an article, again from Facebook, again in the last week or so, about stem cell research, saying the latest stem cell research could lead to immortality. And that's a fairly radical claim. The idea that you could take stem cells in the blood or in the bone marrow and use them to fix things that break down as you get older, so that you never really get old, you never have to die, that's quite a radical thing. And that's a news article this week. I get a lot of ideas around this area from science fiction. I'm going to talk about Cory Doctorow, who's a Canadian author, quite a bit. And this is one of my favourite stories by Cory Doctorow, which is called Untitled. And it's about a couple of programmers, a couple of kind of hackers, who discover an interface to the human, I suppose you call it the metabolome, which is the way that the human metabolic system runs. And they manage to speed up their metabolism and lose weight. They eat as much as they want. They heat the house through the heat that their bodies radiate. And it's kind of what happens to those people when they develop a general interface for the human body. And they can turn this up and turn that down and turn that up and turn this off. I know Shauna Pandy, who's one of the other speakers in this course, has just got into neurosurgery residency. She's going to become a brain surgeon. And I said to her, because we have similar interests, I said to her, I'd like Shauna to be one of the generation of neurosurgeons, neuroscientists who developed the first general brain-machine interface. You can kind of plug something into your brain and actually have a meaningful conversation with it on an informational basis. Option 2 is to augment the human body. And the ideas here come from video games like Deus Ex. So there's the original Deus Ex video game, and then there's been a more recent update called Human Revolution. And in that video game, you start off as a basic player, and as you go through, you can augment different parts of your body. You can make your arms stronger, you can make your eyes see through walls, you can jump for long distances, all that sort of thing. And of course, this is science fiction, of course, but I'm actually faced with a quandary right now about augmentation. My wife keeps saying to me, go to the opticians and get your eyes checked. So I show up at the opticians, and I've never worn glasses, and I'm one of those guys who I don't actually notice the number of people around me who are wearing glasses. But yet when I look at all my colleagues and look at my patients, a lot of people are wearing glasses, maybe more than half of them are wearing glasses, and it's never been something that's bothered me. I've never had to worry about glasses, and it just doesn't occur to me. This is why my wife has to remind me to go to the opticians, because I would never go by myself, till I go blind perhaps. So I go to the optician, and I'm skeptical. I mean, I'm going very much for a check to make sure I don't have any terrible eye disease, right, that I don't know about, because my eyes are perfectly functional. So she sits me in the little thing with the lenses, and she pops all the lenses in and out, and she says, how's your vision now? And my vision gets better. Like, whatever lens she puts in, I can see things crystal clear now, like just fantastically clear. And she says, you need this much correction in this eye and that much correction in that eye. And she says, here's a prescription. And I said, thank you, but no thanks. Like, I know that the technology exists and the lenses exist to make my vision better. I know I can see things more crisply and more clearly, but I can actually see perfectly well at the moment. Thank you very much. I don't want to be augmented. Maybe I don't want to spend the money. Maybe I'm vain. I don't want to wear glasses, right? Or I don't want to have something I'm going to have put in my pocket and lose later on, perhaps. But I don't want to be augmented by the optician just at the moment, even though she can make me see better than I can currently. I'd say thanks, but no thanks. And it's easy to think about augmentation as that Oscar Pistorius story, to say, well, they cut a part of me off I'd take an augmentation to fix that part, right? Or if a part of me, like my eyes, is breaking down, I'd wear glasses so that I can be augmented in that way. But we're all augmented all the time by devices like this, on your hip and in your hand at all times. We've now got into the habit of watching TV now, and when we have a thought that comes up or a question that occurs or some actor we don't recognize, we'll actually pause it and open up the laptop and ask Wikipedia, who is that person? I've got to-do lists, I've got contact lists, I've got reminders all on my phone. I've got Siri, this autonomous agent that you can ask questions to with your voice and it'll give you information back. I've noticed actually sometimes I'm falling asleep and I get some great idea and I don't want to lose it, and I roll over in bed, grab my iPhone and send myself an email so that I don't forget anymore. And I think this device is actually augmenting my memory, because if I just said, oh, I'll remember that in the morning, I often don't remember it in the morning. So I think devices like this are actually augmenting and changing what we're doing. You've probably all seen the Google Glasses video. If you haven't, I strongly recommend you look at the Google Glasses video, because it's going to change a lot of the stuff about what we're doing. And if we have time, and if you haven't seen it, I can play it later on actually. But essentially it's a video where it simulates somebody who wears a pair of glasses that provides a kind of heads-up display to the world. And it'll show you directions, it'll send you messages, you can interact with it just using your eyes. And that's definitely an augmentation, and that is coming down the road. I'm expecting that to be here in the next year or so. And it's just like what they have in the military already, like a heads-up display. The pilot wears the helmet with a little reticule here, and it projects onto his or her retina as well. There's a book, another piece of science fiction by Greg Egan, who's an Australian author. And it's a book called Quarantine, and he talks about the technology kind of running in your head and projecting on your retina, and an autonomous agent handling most of your routine communications while you sleep. And then when you wake up in the morning, it says, here's several things that that I did during the night for you, because the software can handle it for you. In terms of what technology, not just how technology is changing, but what technology is doing to us. There are actually a couple of authors who are looking at this in a bit of detail. One is this guy who's written about, or lady actually, who's written about distraction and the erosion of attention. And I think all of us feel this when we're dealing with our emails, things are coming in. I think this meeting I was at last week, I noticed that I was getting bored with the presentations, and I was checking my email, and I noticed what times I was checking, and it was about every 8 to 10 minutes. I would pull my phone out, check the email, put it back in again. And I was clearly getting distracted by the fact that there's new stuff coming in. Human beings are very interested in new things, new, shiny, sparkly things. And you want to see what the latest email is, what the latest text message is, what the new thing has happened. And we're getting distracted from some of the things that we would not have been distracted from. It kind of fragments our attention. Nicholas Carr is talking about what the internet is doing to our brains. He talks about, in previous generations, we kind of, if information was a sea, we dove into it and descended into it like a kind of a diver, like a scuba diver, and we would sit in the middle of the information and interact with it quite slowly. He talks about the way that we're interacting with information now being like somebody on a jet ski, going on the top of the surface of the information, not really getting into it very deeply, just getting into the very slightest bit of it and moving on to the next part. And he's actually quoted some research in the book where he's talking about how the internet, if you look at how people read on the internet, it's very different from how they read on paper. Like where their eyes go on the screen is different than it would be if you were reading a book. And it may be that there are some neurophysiological changes that are happening because of the way the internet presents information to us. It's a bit like Wikipedia, actually. That a lot of the medical students say, well, we shouldn't use Wikipedia, or we want to use Wikipedia to look up things, medical things. I'm saying, well, I wouldn't take decisions based on Wikipedia. I wouldn't decide what operation to do on Wikipedia or what drug I'd used for a patient on Wikipedia. But it's good for getting a basic grasp of information very quickly. Trouble is, how to use the internet to get a broader grasp of information, to get more information, to get more depth of information. Wikipedia is good for that first 10 words of the definition, and it's maybe not very good for the part after that. Sherry Turkle writes about the effect of technology on our social interactions. And you can see this sometimes when I was with a group of people last week, and there was a pause in what we were doing between one activity and another activity. And there were about 5 of us standing in this little group. All of us pulled out our devices and did this. started to interact with our devices. And we're sitting in a circle, right? We could interact and talk to each other. We'd rather interact with our devices. Because I want to see if my wife sent me a message or who's posted on Facebook or what my latest email is. And technology is making us more connected globally, like more connected to people around the world and less connected locally. Like you're less present when you're interacting with your device, not the people. And she talks about why we expect more from technology and less from each other as the information revolution continues. We actually published a paper on this last year called It's on My iPhone, Attitudes to Mobile Computing Devices in Medical Education. And we looked at, we asked medical students how they were using these new devices, and they said basically that, they said some very interesting stuff about the location of knowing changing. Like previously, when I learned to be a doctor, I would study the books as hard as I could and try to get all the information into my head so that I could produce it at any moment. A patient comes to see me, I can decide what to do by producing information out of my head. And now medical students are looking at this saying, well, as long as I know where to look, as long as I know where I can get the information, I don't need to actually have the information myself. If somebody comes in with diabetes and I don't know much about diabetes, I just look it up on my phone. You know, it's on my iPhone. So the location of knowing, of having it in your head, has moved now, and it's now outside your head. And that's probably all right, but it's a different way of knowing something. You can't say that, you can't pretend that it's actually still in your head when it's not. Option 3 is backup. And this is getting a bit more radical now. This is another book by Cory Doctorow called Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom. And all the characters in this book go through adventures, and some of them are killed and some of them die, but they're all backed up. So it means that they can go back to whatever state they were in last night or this morning before they had their horrible accident. He says, this is actually written, as Doctorow does quite a bit, he talks from a post-singularity perspective. And his prologue, his main character says that he's lived long enough to see the cure for death. He's learned 10 languages because he's lived long enough to do that, and his brain is advanced enough to do that. He's composed 3 symphonies. He's decided to go and move into Disney World, and he's seen the death of the workplace and of work itself. All through the technology that allows you to back up. And you say, well, okay, this is never going to happen, right? Here is an article from the BBC in November last year. It's almost a year old, this article now. Scientists at MIT who are replicating brain activity on a chip. And if you can do the same activity on a chip that's happening in your brain, then the next step would be to take all that activity and just put it on the chip and have it backed up somewhere. So that's a big stride towards backing up. And it may be, I mean, you look in popular drama, you look at things like Doctor Who, for instance, a lot of episodes about cloning and about, and Star Trek as well, actually, a lot of episodes about cloning and cloning technology. This is my clone. I'm someplace else having a much better time. What happens with that information once it's backed up? Where does it go? If it's put into a different body, what if there are 2 of you, perhaps? How does that work? Those are fairly complicated questions. What about abandoning? This is the slide that I used to finish my first talk. This is an email from December 21st, 2044, and it's from the Edmonton Upload team, and it's addressed to me, and I'm scheduled for upload on January the 2nd, 2045. I'm going to be in the first group of people who get uploaded. And it just says, this is normal, right? We're going to upload you somewhere, and it'll take about 15 minutes, and you might feel a little bit sick afterwards. We recommend you should not drive yourself home. So that's what I'm looking forward to saying, well, what if they can upload me somewhere? What if they can put me somewhere else? It's a bit more secure than this body. And it takes you that kind of idea takes you to some interesting places. This is Philip K. Dick and a scene from the movie Blade Runner as well, and the original book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? What does it mean to be human? Do you have to be located in the body to be human? Can you be in some sort of synthetic substrate, like Rutger Hauer is on the right-hand side here? I mean, Harrison Ford's hunting down and killing the replicants, who are supposed to be soulless, evil androids. And it turns out that, in fact, they're not quite like that, and they're actually portrayed much more like human beings. And Harrison Ford actually comes off as a fairly soulless person himself. And in fact, in the director's cut, the director Ridley Scott explains, in fact, that Harrison Ford is supposed to be the 6th replicant. And in fact, he's the least human of them all. And really, this is one of the key questions that Philip K. Dick asks in all of his books is, what does it mean to be, what does it mean to be human? And he talks quite a bit about bodies and androids. Here's Ian Banks. This is Ian Banks' first big science fiction novel called Consider Phlebas. And he talks about a civilization called the Culture in the far future, where consciousnesses are located in space and in bodies of different sorts as well. And they can be located in little things that are as tiny as a drop of water or big things that are giant, enormous structures. So I'd recommend you have a look at some of the Ian Banks stuff as well, because he's talking about backing up and being present outside bodies as well. Option 5 is the idea that's most foreign to me and most foreign to all of you, I suspect, which is transcendence, which is getting past biology and transcending, moving away. And a number of authors have looked at this guy called David Simpson. We've actually, since my first talk, we've become friends on Facebook, David Simpson and I. And he talks about what it would be like in a post-singularity future. What is whatever comes after humanity going to be like, and what's it going to be like to live in that? Cory Doctorow's new novel just came out in the last couple of weeks called The Rapture of the Nerds, and the subtitle is A Tale of the Singularity, Post-Humanity, and Awkward Social Situations. And he talks about, he's actually writing a novel from the point of view of somebody who's gone through the singularity and is now in this post-human space. I like this book by Greg Bear called Blood Music. And this actually, what he describes in this novel is essentially a biological singularity, where all our body get taken over by a virus that puts us all into a single combined mind. And again, that's a form of transcendence. Greg Egan talks about the same sort of thing, except on a kind of a technological, physical level. Actually, he talks about essentially consciousness is moving through different forms of existence, moving from universe to universe. It's quite existential, it's quite trippy, but I quite like it. It's called diaspora. And it sounds weird, right? It sounds very odd. What are we talking about? This is so odd and foreign to be nearly meaningless. I'd actually go back to the words of Richard Feynman. I think when people ask me, well, who are the 3 people you'd bring back from the dead if you could, Feynman's always on that list. One of the greatest physicists, one of the greatest thinkers that ever existed. He says, we're at the very beginning of time for the human race, and it's not unreasonable grappling with problems, but this is only the start of our history. There's tens of thousands of years coming up. We should do what we can, learn what we can, improve the solutions and pass them on. So Feynman would be, I think if Feynman was still around, he died a little while ago. If Feynman was still around, he would be very interested in singularity solutions. I suspect he would actually he'd think that singularity was a load of crap, actually. I would suspect, I think he'd probably be coming up with some better ideas, actually, but that's because I'm a big Feynman fan. So as I've said, I think one of the things I want you to take away from this is that technology is coming and it's developing and it's advancing all the time, and there's stuff that is out there that doesn't work yet, like backup, like reliable augmentation, like brain scanning, like consciousness uploading, that doesn't work, but at some point it will work, potentially. And if it does, it could change the whole game. I mean, bear in mind, electricity, you go back to Tesla and Edison battling about AC and DC current. Electricity used to be a big deal, and now it's just invisible, it's just everywhere. We don't even think about electricity as a technology anymore. We don't think about air conditioning or movement of air in buildings or heating as a technology anymore because we're so used to it. It's just not there. It's like Arthur C. Clarke said that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And this is kind of what we're talking about when we talk about uploading and backup and transcendence. The other person to think about in this field is William Gibson. William Gibson talks about the future is already here, and you just haven't seen it yet. It's not widely distributed. There are pockets of technology that are really showing us where we're going to go. I think that's why I'm interested in what effect the internet is having on our brains, why the iPhone is important in education, because it's changing how we do things. In terms of what happens next, I think this is where it gets messy and really interesting. And this is what kind of happened with the Pistorius story. And it's what happens with those brain trauma patients who've had a brain injury and are now being given some hope of having their lives improved by brain scanning technologies. What is it that we as individuals need, and what is it that we want? And when someone offers us something, how do we decide whether to take it or not? How do I decide whether to go to the optician and get those glasses or not? Do we want to have the best sight that I can have or not? What do we hope for and what do we fear? And some of the scenarios that the technology brings to us, like cloning, like being backed up remotely somewhere, like what is consciousness? There are some pretty hopeful things there, but there are things that are pretty scary as well. As I've said, it's not going to happen all around the world all at the same time, so it depends whether you are in the haves and have-nots, and this course addresses some of that as well. Clearly there's going to be some power and politics come into play with how this technology is adapted as we go forward. And clearly there's going to be some influence of time and money as well. I mean, if you have the time to adopt this and you've got the money to adopt it, clearly you're going to have a different experience. And this is from the blurb, actually, of that novel, the new novel by Cory Doctorow. He says it's the dusk of the 21st century. There's 1 billion people left on Earth. Those who haven't emigrated off planet, joining one of the dense thinker clades of the inner solar system. These post-human consciousness have mostly sworn off dealing with their still human cousins, but their minds still wander, and they casually spam Earth's networks with disruptive technologies. So Doctor's writing actually about the people who've been left behind on Earth. The fact that the majority of people have actually taken the technology and gone and moved off planet. He talks about this, about a cloud of intelligence around the inner part of the solar system, and the people who are left on the planet being almost like a different species than the post-humans. So, just to finish off that, again, that's my definition of the singularity, and I think it's equally exciting and perplexing, and I don't know, it kind of makes me a little bit afraid sometimes when I think about things like this, things like the Terminator, right? Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. Maybe there's going to be an AI that takes over the world, right? Maybe there's Skynet is coming. Maybe we're all going to be trapped within the Matrix. I'm a bit more hopeful than that, because I think probably if we get this right, we're going to be the spiritual machines that Kurzweil talked about. I don't think we need to be too worried about artificial intelligence or machines taking over. I think what you're seeing already is that we and the machines are kind of getting together. I mean, I was talking to a neurosurgeon recently, and he was talking about brain implants. And he was saying he didn't think they would ever happen, or a communicating thing would never happen with a device. And I said to him, you know, you're wearing your iPhone on your hip right now. It's sitting right there. Like, it's not secured to the bone, but it's sitting on your hip bone. I mean, what if your iPhone was 100 times smaller and it sat on the bone behind your ear and it communicated with your brain like that? Would that work? You know, and I don't think it's going to be us over here in the meat space and the machines over there in their technological space, and we're kind of having some kind of war. I think we're actually going to get together with machines and increasingly integrate technology into bodies, and that's where we're going to go. And if it works out well, I think actually it brings you to the larger question of what do you do then? What do you do if you don't have to die? What if you do if you can live 10,000 or 100,000 years? What if you don't have to work anymore? What if you don't have to eat or reproduce anymore? How does that go? So I wanted to finish up with a few minutes left for questions. It's 3:15, so that's about all I've got to say. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll take any questions you have. There's my email address at the bottom, jswhite1ualberta.ca, or just look me up on Surgery 101 or Facebook. Very happy to have a chat later on if you like. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you very much.